this evening we shall discuss the difference between the practice of concentration, samatha bhavana, and the development of insights, or vipassana bhavana. Sometimes we do practice concentration meditation to support the practice of Satipatthana meditation. One of the discourses found in the Samyutta Nikaya. Samyutta Nikaya is one of the 5 Nikayas. So one of the discourses found in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha explained that when a bhikkhu also includes those who practice Satipatthana meditation. So when one dwells contemplating the body in the body, or when one dwells contemplating feelings in feelings, when one dwells contemplating mind in mind, or when one dwells contemplating phenomena in phenomena. So in other words, when one practices the 4 foundation of mindfulness, ardence, clearly comprehending, mindful, overcoming covetousness and grief in the world. So while one is practicing Satipatthana meditation, there arises in him or her, based on the body, either a fever in the body, or sluggishness of mind, or the mind is distracted outwardly. Then that bhikkhu, or those who practice Satipatthana meditation, should then direct his mind towards some inspiring sign. In other words, one can direct the mind to any objects of meditation that inspire confidence. So when one directs the mind towards some inspiring object, then greatness is born. When the mind is gradient, rapture is born, and so on. So until one experiences happiness, when the mind is happy, then the mind also become concentrated. So at that time, one can switch back to the mind, be mindful internal again, because the purpose of directing the mind to an inspiring object has been achieved. So one can withdraw the mind, and from that inspiring object, and switch back to the practice of 4 foundation of mindfulness again. So when sometimes one is overpowered by certain hindrances or pain, then one may practice concentration meditation, such as loving kindness meditation, or when one is overpowered by the hindrance of doubts, then one may choose to practice Buddhanusati, recollections of the attributes of the Buddha, and so on. So when the doubt has subsided and has attained some degree of concentration, then one may switch back to the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness. So when we are when meditators we are overpowered by hindrances or certain defilements, such as the hindrance of restlessness and remorse, the hindrance of sloth and torpors, and so on. Then they may, if they could not overcome the hindrances by mindfulness, then they may switch over the practice to the inspiring sign or the objects that enable meditators to overcome the mental hindrances or the mental defilements. Usually we may practice the four protections meditations. There are four protections of meditations. The first is Buddhanusati, recollections of the attributes of the Buddha. Then Maranasati, contemplation on death, or Asubha Bhavana, meditating on the loathsomeness of the body, and Metta Bhavana, loving kindness meditations. So when meditators encounter certain hindrances or mental defilements, they should put forth effort to mindful and note these hindrances or defilements. But sometimes the hindrance is very strong. Meditators could not overcome it by mindfulness. For example, the mind is restless for the whole day or for 1 or 2 days. The meditators may stop the practice of four foundation meditation for a period of time. They may practice loving kindness meditation for 1 or 2 sessions sitting, or walking meditation. They do practice loving kindness as well. So when restlessness has subsided, then meditators should switch back to the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness. All mental hindrances, defilements, are mental states or mental processes. They are not permanent. They are also subject to arising and passing away. If meditators are able to put forth enough effort to mindful and note them, then they could realize the true natures of the hindrances and the mental defilements. In other words, they are not everlasting. They subject to arising and passing away. So meditators need to be patient. It is better to overcome the hindrances by mindfulness. In that way, meditators, you gain some insight knowledge into the true natures of impermanent or anicca. But sometimes meditators need to practice concentration meditation, especially the 4 protective meditations. Then they should know the way of the practice of concentration or development of concentration. For example, when meditators practice loving kindness meditation, they should concentrate the mind on the development of the mental states or the thoughts of loving kindness. So as a loving kindness meditators, should not pay attention or be mindful of other phenomena, such as painful sensation, thinking or wandering mind, and so on. If meditators are developing loving kindness during walking, then they should not be mindful of the steps or the standing postures, the turning movements of the body, and so on. This is because the aim of concentration meditation is to attain calmness or peacefulness of mind or tranquility of mind by concentrating the mind on a single object. So when meditators could concentrate the mind on a single object very well, then the mind becomes calmer and calmer, or more and more peaceful. Or in other words, mental hindrances or defilements will be suppressed. So this is known as Vikambana Pahana, overcoming or suppressing mental defilements by absorption concentration. When meditators practice concentration meditation, they are able to attain 2 types of concentration. The first is known as access concentration or neighborhood concentration. The concentrations before the attainment of the first stage of absorption concentration. When meditators choose certain object of concentration, for example, Buddhanusati, or recollections of the attributes of Buddha, or Dhammanusati, or recollections of the attributes of Dhamma, or Sanghanusati, recollections of the attributes of the Sangha, and other objects of recollections. Meditator could only attain access concentration or neighborhood concentration. It's known as Upachara Samadhi in Pali. If meditator wish to attain absorption concentration, then they may have to choose other objects. For example, meditators who has been practicing Buddhanussati and has attained neighborhood concentration and wishes to attain absorption concentration, the first stage, second stage, and so on. Then the meditators has to change your object. For example, change to the practice of metta. So in that way, by the practice of metta, meditators will be able to attain the third stage of absorption concentration in accordance with the Sutanta method. Sutanta method classifies absorption concentration into the 4 stages. So one of the benefits of practicing concentration is when meditators could attain certain degree of concentration and the mind is free from hindrances and other defilements, then that concentration will become a support to the practice of 4 foundation mindfulness or development of insight. So sometimes mindfulness meditators may choose to practice concentration meditation for a period of time so that the concentration will become a support to the practice of mindfulness or development of insight knowledge. So when one is practicing concentration meditation, one should not be mindful of other phenomena. When the mind is thinking, one should ignore the thinking. In other words, one doesn't pay any attention to the thinking. One should continue the practice of concentration. For example, if the object is metta, then one will pay more and more attention to the thoughts of metta, to the thoughts of loving kindness by wishing the object of loving kindness repeatedly. When one is able to pay attention to the thoughts of metta again and again, the thinking will disappear eventually. If there's a strong painful sensation arising, then loving kindness meditators should not mindful and note the pain. So loving kindness meditators should continue the practice of loving kindness. If they are able to pay more and more attention to the thoughts of metta, for example, by wishing may so and so be well and healthy always, may so and so be free from suffering, eventually loving kindness meditators will not feel much pain. Sometimes the concentration is so good that they do not feel the pain anymore. So the purpose of practicing loving kindness is to overcome dosa. The word dosa means hatred, aversion, anger, ill will, and so on. If one is able to practice loving kindness well, then the mind will not dwell on the aversion towards pain or any unpleasant conditions. In other words, by the practice of loving kindness, the mind is softened. Will not dwell on the aversion towards unpleasant conditions. So in that way, one would be able to practice loving mindfulness better. So meditators, when meditators practice concentration meditation, they should not pay attention or be mindful of other phenomena. If the mind or the attention has gone to other phenomena, meditators just ignore it and come back to the object of concentration again. But by practicing concentration meditation, meditators will not be able to realize the true natures of mental and physical phenomena. In other words, concentration meditators are not able to develop wisdoms or insight knowledge. They could not realize the true natures of nama rupa, the mental and physical phenomena. Concentration meditators are not able to realize the profound teachings of the Buddha, such as the Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, the teachings of conditionality. It's not possible to realize the profound teachings of the Buddha, or such profound teachings of Buddha, by the practice of concentration meditation. But we may practice concentration meditation as a support or to the practice of insight or the cultivation of wisdom. So when meditators aspire to develop wisdoms in order to realize the noble truth, then they have to learn the practice of four foundations of mindfulness. When they want to realize the Four Noble Truths, they do not have to look for this truth somewhere else. They do not have to find out the truth from the books. Actually, this truth is not found at other places, but this truth can be found within yourself. So in other words, you have to turn your attention inward. Only by turning your attention inward, or be mindful of your own mind and body processes, and when you're able to be mindful constantly and continuously, then you come to realize the true nature of mental and physical phenomena. You come to realize the cause and effect between the mind and the body process So when you practice mindfulness meditation, you do not have to mindful of the external. If you're mindful of external, you are not able to develop wisdoms or insight knowledge. So you have to mindful of internal. So only by mindful of internal, you gain direct experience, you gain first-hand knowledge. So in the words, Namarupa, or mental and physical phenomena, or in other words, the five aggregates of clinging are the legitimate objects of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditations. So we can't concentrate the mind on one phenomenon. As you know, every phenomenon is arising and passing away very instantly. Mindfulness meditators can't fix the mind on one phenomenon. When a phenomenon is arising, then it will disappear very instantly. Meditators can't hold that phenomenon or grasping that phenomenon. Is because every mental phenomenon, every physical phenomenon is arising and passing away very instantly. But when meditators have not yet developed deep concentration, in other words, momentary concentration, they could not realize the instant arising and passing away of every phenomenon. So they need to put forth effort to develop constant and continuous mindfulness. In other words, constant and continuous mindfulness is a cause. The effect is deeper and deeper concentration, or in this momentary concentration. So meditators could not concentrate the mind on one phenomenon. We may begin the meditation, for example, be mindful of the movements of rising or movements of falling during sitting meditation, at the beginning of sitting meditation. But movements of rising or movements of falling are not a permanent physical process. They are also subject to arising and passing away. When the mindfulness and concentration are not strong enough, meditators could not realize the process of movements clearly. When meditators are mindful of other process movements, such as the processes of lifting movements, pushing movements, and dropping movements during the practice walking meditation, or other process movements such stretching movements, bending movements, standing up, sitting down, and so on, during the mindfulness of daily activities, they may not able to realize the movements clearly. They perceive the form. At the beginning of the meditation, the mind is still clinging to the form. In other words, the form is something is very real. The mind clings to it. So the mind is easily cling to something there's a form. In other words, there's a substance to cling to it. But when meditators could develop more and more attentive and precise mindfulness, they realized that they could not cling to the process of movements, or in other words, they could not cling to any ultimate realities. You can't catch hold of an ultimate reality. Every ultimate reality, such as movements, hardness, softness, coldness, and so on, are arising and passing away very rapidly. Mindfulness meditators can't catch hold of it. In other words, as soon as you are conscious of a movement, that movements will disappear instantly. The consciousness that comes to know the movements also subject to instant passing away. So in other words, during the practice of mindfulness meditation, insight meditation, meditators do not have a single object. They have to be mindful of whatever object that's arising. They are objects that belong to the first foundation, body. They are objects or sensation belong to the second foundation. Then there are mental phenomena, or that belong to the third foundation. And most of the objects in the fourth foundation, mindfulness of Dhamma, are mental objects, except the aggregate of physicality or materiality or rupa khanda, which is one of the 5 aggregates of clinging. So the purpose of practicing Vipassana meditation is to realize the true natures of mental and physical phenomena. In other words, to realize the 3 common characteristics of mental and physical phenomena. As you know, they are anicca or impermanence, dukkha or unsatisfactories, anatta, no self or non-self. So when meditators are realizing the 3 common characteristics of mental and physical phenomena, at that moment they are also realizing their specific characteristics or the individual characteristics. Or in other words, meditators will be realizing the specific characteristics or the individual characteristics of mental and physical phenomena clearly. Then they come to realize there are 3 common characteristics. So meditators have to be mindful of whatever object or phenomenon that's arising at that moment. And whenever the mind is wandering or thinking, meditators should mindful and know it. If meditators are able to mindful and note every mental state well, especially during the practice of sitting meditation and walking meditation, then they would realize two kinds of benefit. The first benefit is mental states such as thinking, wandering mind, or emotional mental states and mental defilements and mental hindrances will be getting lesser and lesser. In that way, meditators will be able to gain stronger and stronger mindfulness and deeper concentration. And the other benefit is that mindfulness meditators will come to realize the true nature of the mental states, as well as the process of the mindfulness or the noting mind. So when meditators are able to realize the true natures of the mental state, then they would make more progress. So in other words, when meditators practice mindfulness meditation, they have to mindful whatever object or phenomenon that's arising in the mind and body. They can't choose the object they like. At the beginning of practice, you may have to lead the mind to the object, or give an object to the mind. For example, when the mindfulness is quite weak and concentration is not developed, meditators have to lead the mind, for example, to the basic object of sitting meditation, such as the movement rising or falling, or the sitting postures and the touching points. But when mindfulness is getting stronger with some degree of deep concentration, meditators will realize that mindfulness will note the object by itself. For example, when meditators are mindful of rising movements, if there's a strong pain arising, which is stronger or more distinct than the movements of rising, then the mindfulness will move to that stronger pain by itself. Or sometimes meditators will realize there's an instant appearance of the mindfulness with the object or the pain. Then meditators have to mindful note pain. Meditators should not bring the mindfulness back to the rising movements or falling movements. Sometimes meditators are mindful note pain. When the intensity of pain is decreasing, if the rising movements appear clearer than that pain, the mindfulness will return to the movements of rising by itself. So meditators realize that this mental state of mindfulness is beyond control, is going towards the object by itself. When the mindfulness is getting sharper, meditators perceive the mindfulness appear with the object by itself. In other words, the mindfulness is arising or appearing dependent on that object. So meditators could not stay with one object. Sometimes meditators could mindful and note certain phenomena very well. For example, pain, or sometimes they could perceive a series of the broken process of rising movements. When they mindful note a process rising movements, that process movements disappear very instantly. Then there's another process rising movements. Then mindful of that process movements. That process movements also disappear very instantly. So sometimes meditators come to realize that they are able to mindful and note a series of broken processor movements constantly, continuously. They come to realize there's a series of broken processes of falling movements. There's one process falling movements, then another process of falling movements, then they perceive another process of falling movements. So sometimes one might think that meditators are mindful of one phenomenon or one phenomenon. In fact, if meditators could mindful and note it correctly, they come to realize every process of rising movements is a new object. When the process of rising movements has appear and then disappear instantly, then another second process of rising movements appear. Sometimes meditators might think the same process movements appear again. But if they have gained insight knowledge, they come to realize the following process of rising movements is a new object. It's not the previous movements. So this is explained in the scriptures and commentaries. When meditators realize the nature of impermanence clearly, they come to realize what the object arising at that moment is a new object. Another example is painful sensation. Sometimes meditators are mindful and note pain. When the painful sensation had disappeared, then a few seconds later, or 1 or 2 minutes later, painful sensation is arising at another place. Some meditators might think the same pain comes back again at another place. But in reality, that pain is a new object. It's not the previous pain that had disappeared, now appear again at another place. So I shall explain the definitions of impermanence in another talk. So it is important to realize that when meditators are practicing mindfulness meditation, they have to practice in accordance with the 4th foundation of mindfulness. It's not possible to stay with one object even more than a second. So in other words, when meditators mindfulness meditators have attained deep concentration, in those momentary concentration. That momentary concentration gives rise to insight knowledge or wisdoms. Insight knowledge or wisdoms, in other words, realizing the true nature of mental and physical phenomena, anicca, dukkha, anatta, through personal experience or direct experience. So this wisdom is known as panya. So this panya is also conducive to the realizations of the Four Noble Truths and overcoming or uprooting the mental defilements. So meditators have to realize the difference between these two types of meditation. When meditators practice concentration meditation or samatha bhavana, they have to choose one object, and meditators have to concentrate the mind on one object all the time. Concentration meditators need not have to pay attention or be mindful of other mental and physical phenomena. But when meditators are practicing mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, then they have to be mindful of the mental and physical phenomena as they really occur. So they do not have to conceptualize the experience. They do not apply any preconceptions or preconceived idea into the practice. Meditators learn to take whatever object or phenomenon that's arising at that moment as a new object, so that they have interest into it. Sometimes meditators might think this object, this phenomenon is the same object that they have been mindful in the last session of sitting meditation or in the previous day. They might think this is the same experience or same pain and so on. So meditators learn to take whatever object or sensation that's arising at that moment as something new, so that they can look at it without any preconceptions. It doesn't based on past experience or previous experience. So when meditators look at every object as if a new object or new phenomenon, in that way they may gain more experiences or new experience in the meditation. So meditators have to make a distinction between these two types of meditation. One leads to the concentration, the other leads to wisdoms. And wisdom is the most precious treasures in our life, especially supramundane wisdoms. So I wish meditators really understand the differences between these two types of meditation, so that they could make progress and realize their spiritual goal soon.